acknowledging they are forward-leaning about it.
The options are essentially stop providing services or do it for free.
The economy is a system that was designed. We can redesign it to get the outcomes we want to see.
Actually, this wasn't inevitable. You had a choice about what you gave your money to, and you chose to keep your promise to landlord.
It is quite devastating to see this current government absolutely trash what has been a really good track record with disability.
The complete lack of investment into Te Ao Māori.
What is the top priority for that $15 billion? The government says the top priority for that $15 billion is tax cut.
But it's not fair that a religious group like Destiny Church stands outside a school. If it was any other protest group, parents would not accept that.
Hello there, kia ora, welcome. How is everybody holding up tonight in the chat? Which there's already like a dozen people there, so it's starting off relatively well. How goes things with you, Blake?
Good. It's a Saturday for a change rather than a Friday night, so that's quite nice.
Yeah, so much for taking the weekend off.
Yeah, we unfortunately, and we'll get to it in a minute, because of the fallout from the debate, we haven't been able to take our week off like we planned. But we'll do that later in the year.
Yeah, it's probably a really good time to tell people I'm looking at taking most of December off so I can go tiki touring around the country. Say hi to people in person.
Tiki. But no, we're not doing a meet and greet. Just a proper holiday.
I might, if there's enough call for it. Give me something to do, content to make.
Yeah.
Before we kick off, because we're still waiting for Matt to sign in, do you want to give everyone a bit of an update on the petition for us? Let everybody know how that's going.
It's over 1,600 or 1,600 now. Yeah. So that's pretty cool. So we've still got 49 days left. So if people haven't shared it yet, which I assume most of you will have, please share it. Continue to share it. And yeah, get it shared as much as possible. As this week I can't say too much due to privacy reasons, but there is a whole lot more stuff to come out about this, and it's not good. So,
it's one of the things that's actually surprised me about this whole being online thing is we get sent stuff that can't be released yet, and we hear about things behind the scenes that we can't talk about. But there's some horrific stuff happening there behind the scenes that we can't talk about, like funding cuts and really tight regulations going on to certain organizations around how much they can spend and how many people they can hire. And we only see a tip of the iceberg in the media at the moment. So I really hope that we can get more people off there signing this petition to send a message that it's really important that the government listens to people.
And before anyone asks, yes, we are trying to book the opposition disability spokespeople, but it's proving a bit of a challenge.
That's the other thing that I don't think people realize is that trying to coordinate MPs to come onto the show can actually be really tricky. The last couple of weeks with recesses actually made it a little bit more difficult, but they're coming back, so they'll be a bit more readily available. We are working on a list that we want to get through on both sides of the House. I think that's really important for people to know as well. As much as we like talking to the left-wing people who, it's good to talk to them, it's also important, I think, to get as many voices as we can out there so people can see as many perspectives as possible, which is part of the reason why we wanted to do tonight's show as well, because we want to listen to people about how they felt about the debate that was on the working group in particular. I should also point out, even though it is ticking across the bottom, so I'm sure people can see this, although there'll be an audio version of it later, that comments are only open to subscribers of the YouTube page, and they're only open to subscribers who have been there for more than 5 minutes. And that's because the content I did on, I think it was Monday, that looked at the event itself, got some of the most hateful, racist crap come through from people who are big fans of people like Whangarei Tim. So it was really important to make sure that while people can have their say, it needs to be respectful, and giving people 5 minutes to think about what it is that they want to put up there if they haven't already signed up is really important. So they've got a chance to calm down. But I will also make sure that if and I see that Kiwi Skirt's in the chat at the moment, she'll do the same thing. If anybody's going to be just an absolute racist animal, they're going to be blocked straight away. I have a zero tolerance policy on this kind of thing. I just don't like dealing with them. It's not fun. Not fun at all.
And one more thing I will preface about the people from both sides of the house that we've reached out to is some people that have agreed in principle may not be the people you expect. So just fair warning. You may see some surprises.
I like surprises, usually, depending on where they were or who they're from. But yeah, totally agree. Absolutely. One of the things I found really interesting actually about that particular individual's debate coverage, because he did cover the debate, was that, and he does it for everything, he'll take a clip of just what he wants to hear and wants people to hear and says, this proves exactly what I'm saying, without context or research or pushback. And yet somehow he's got like 6,000 followers. It's really strange. Really very strange. That's also a really important one, Dave. That's one of the reasons why I have like a zero tolerance policy. It's just like gone. And I'm in the process of writing a book about some of the hateful stuff I've received this year. Should hopefully be out in time for Christmas on all digital platforms if I ever get around to finishing writing it. We still have no sign of Matt.
Well, we're waiting. I'll just say, one thing that we are looking at for next year is expanding this to a bit of pop culture. So if you guys are interested in it, please tell us what kind of pop culture-y things you'd like to see.
Do you know the TV series Brokenwood Mysteries?
Yes, yeah, I like that show.
So some friends of mine who run actually a place that I get a lot of this collectible stuff, Retro Space in Takapuna, they've got Brokenwood Mysteries actually recording there this week. And I'm like, what little town has that kind of stuff? It's very strange. Very, very strange. Like, what little town has a pop culture store? I like this one, pop culture for the Emperor. Yes, definitely. Right. Well, while we wait for Matt then, because I can, this week, today, actually marks the 1 year anniversary since the election, which, feels like a decade ago. And there's a reason it feels like a decade ago. It's because everything has happened in between. It's been really full on. So I figured since there's only like 22 people watching and we're still waiting for Matt to show up, I'm going to give you guys a preview of the video that I've got lined up to go out on Monday, which is the 14th. So it's the actual anniversary of the election day. I wanted to show people why they felt so overwhelmed with how the last year has felt. So it means it's really full on, like really, really full on. So while I play this, which goes for about 3 minutes as a preview, Blake's going to flick Matt a quick message just going, how far away are you? All right, so
my camera will go out just so people
that's all right. We'll put this full screen. Everybody can watch it. So yeah, sneak preview just for everybody in the audience tonight, all 20 odd. So I'll take that one off, pull this one up. Enjoy. So yeah, preview for everybody. Yes, it goes fast. Yes, it's a lot. And that's not even all of the headlines that I've collected over the last year. It's just a lot for everyone to process. But I get so many people telling me as well that they're just overwhelmed by everything because this government's moved so fast on everything that it's kind of like Whiplash. I kind of wanted to show that. This is the most artistic-y, student filmy thing I've made in a while. So yeah. So people can find that on all platforms on Monday. It will be out. Do we have any update from Matt?
All I can say is I have to keep ducking in and out because it keeps writing messages.
It keeps writing messages.
Yeah.
Okay. He could just follow the link.
I said, are you on the way? He said yes. Sorry.
Okay. He'll get here when he gets here then. So that's all good. I'm kind of curious, Blake, what your impression has been of the last 12 months of this government.
Well, apart from the disability stuff, there has been now people are going to not like me for this. There are a few things that I've actually liked, and there are a few things that I haven't liked.
What have you liked?
This is very controversial, but I quite like some of the policies that are going through at the moment about that David Seymour is trying to put through about medical information and education. I think that's really important, especially for people in disability schools who can't defend themselves, especially to know that if the person they're employing is at risk of having a heart attack and so forth. Because, you know, if it happened in a disabled school, especially if they start to turn those into charter schools, if their teacher aides are on a lunch break and their teacher dropped to the floor, they're not going to be able to go and get somebody.
Okay.
So
but I'm going to interrupt you there and do like a fancy graphic and then bring Matt in because he's sitting there in the green room at the moment. Give the people what they want. Kia ora, Matt.
Kia ora. Sorry I'm late. I just wrapped up a bit of a hosted a group of Filipino nurses here at my house.
Oh,
And
nice.
as you fellas know, conversations tend to go on a lot longer when you're around the dinner table.
Did they bring something to eat?
They bought pork adobo
Nice.
and something called pork Sazak.
Yep.
Yeah. Lovely people, but wanting to tell me about their plight, having come to this country of ours to work in our health system, they feel as if they're being completely disadvantaged.
Yeah. The Philippine government actually put out a warning about a month ago to nurses over there saying stop looking at New Zealand as a place to go.
And also the Indian government have also more or less said, well, the Indian High Commissioner, I think, has also more or less said the same thing. And if we're not careful, and sorry to say this, but if we're not very, very careful, what will end up happening is that all of these people that come to our country are in demand in other countries. So why come here?
Yeah. And there are other countries like Australia that would probably pay them better.
Oh, hell yeah. And not only that, I mean, I find it ironic that we're out there fighting for, or not we personally, but the government is out there saying to all the Australian miners, come and dig up our ground and all the rest of it. But they are paying scant regard to the plight of these workers who have such an important role to play in a health system under an immense amount of pressure.
Did you hear the news about what happened with North Shore last weekend, North Shore Hospital?
Yeah.
Is that something that the group that you're with tonight have had to deal with or have come across? Or
yeah, they talked about that actually. They were not North Shore Hospital, but they talked about the fact that there seems to be an ever increasing number of people, particularly in emergency rooms, that will go to A&E, that tend to let's just say treat people from other countries and other ethnicities like crap. But if I can, this has probably got nothing to do with what we're going to talk about. But
yeah,
what disturbs me the most in these examples is that a lot of these workers have come here on the off chance that they will work as nurses, and what they end up doing is working as orderlies or cleaners and things like this. I'd previously sat down with a group of Indian migrants who came here, paid a huge amount of money to dodgy immigration agents or so-called consultants, sometimes upwards to about $50,000 on the expectation that they would have a job, and all of a sudden they're working in a nail salon out in South Auckland. And so I think the government, instead of trying to say, oh, look, let's get 3% in royalties or whatever it is to dig up ground and all this other sort of stuff, you might want to clean up our immigration system first, particularly for those workers who are at risk. I mean, and also just, sorry, I'm on my rant.
That's all good. That's what we have you for.
Another thing that really also beggars belief, guys, Paul and Blake, is that, a lot of these people, there is an assumption by some New Zealanders that these people come from rich households or backgrounds, or that they can afford to pay all this money or whatever, or if they want to come here, they should have a lot of money in their bank account. A lot of the people that come to work here are working because they don't come from economically successful upper classes or even the middle class. We're talking about people who genuinely struggle to get along in life, and so they do move for economic reasons. And sometimes those economic reasons mean that they're in their countries of domicile where they come from, they carry with them huge debts. And if not them carrying huge debts to pay off to these dodgy consultants or advisors, certainly their families who are left behind, they pay huge debts. It's like international students. About a month ago, I sat down with a group of Chinese students who have come to study in New Zealand here in Auckland. And same sort of thing. There's an assumption that they all come from rich families, and so they're only allowed to work a minimum, I think it is about like 20 hours a week, and yet they're working a lot longer than 20 hours a week because they don't have any other income. Their parents aren't rich people. They're here to get themselves ahead in life, and it's just horrible how we treat people. Now, we're a rich, successful, rather wealthy country. We call us. I mean, when we have a look at our place in the world, we have a look at our performance against the OECD data. We don't have a look at ourselves at the bottom 10% of every other developing country in the world. We are actually quite a wealthy country, and yet we treat people from less advantaged or from disadvantaged backgrounds like crap. All right, rant over.
Well, I say it actually raises an interesting point for me, because you're looking at how we look after migrants coming to the country, but we do have some problems here as well with the people who are from this country. And I think that was kind of highlighted earlier in the week, actually, with that debate with Helmut and David. I'm kind of curious, do you see any links between sort of the rhetoric that we get out of somebody like David to the way that him and his supporters treat Maori, and the way that the population as a whole treats migrants?
So the answer to that question is yes. I think it's very convenient for politicians in particular to throw their grenades and then walk away. I call that the matter of convenience. What they're actually doing through their narratives and through their rhetoric and their slogans and their politics is creating an operating environment through which hatred takes hold. And that hatred metamorphosizes itself in a way that emboldens other people to spout these slogans in a different way. And we see this sort of behaviour emerging on buses and motor vehicles and taxis or Ubers and bars and workplaces and schoolyards. And so, sadly, and this is my view, that through this debate that David Seymour so desperately wants to have for relevancy, he is really outing the very worst in New Zealand society. But also, sadly, the very worst in New Zealand society has always been there. It's hidden in the dark corners of our lounge rooms, and when the 6 o'clock news comes on, and old granddad now will spout abuse at the TV and all this other sort of stuff. So on one hand, they are creating the operating environment through which hatred takes hold, but on the other hand, we would be lying to ourselves if we didn't think that there isn't an undertone of both unconscious bias and racism alive and kicking in Aotearoa, New Zealand.
Mm-hmm. Can I go full?
Yeah. Yep. I'm sorry. I'll stop dominating.
So
and sorry, I'm ranting.
So so Matt, so this is going to be a bit controversial probably, but one thing that the debate did teach me, because people asked me, did it change your opinion on anything? And the only thing it changed my opinion on is we do need because it's so divisive, I do think we need a referendum or a vote of some description in some form, because it's the Tuesday debate or whatever day it was so divisive that it kind of showed that we need a vote of some description for me. And I didn't feel like that going in, but by the time it finished, seeing how divisive it was, I kind of think we need some sort of vote portion.
So I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, Blake. I think the very presence of the feeling that somehow the majority want this is incorrect. And also, the vast majority of New Zealanders are up to play about what's going on. They understand this isn't about Te Tiriti o Waitangi or the Treaty of Waitangi. This is actually just about politics. And Mr. Seymour is trying to speak not to you and not to me, and certainly not to Paul or anybody else. What he's trying to do is speak to a base that he's trying to attract over in a very small percentage as well. Seymour's a very crafty and cunning politician. And so the vast majority of people, they don't want the referendum. I can tell you now that the vast majority of Māori, and Māori themselves, are not a homogenous voting group. We don't all vote for Te Pāti Māori. We don't all vote for Labour. I mean, some of us vote for New Zealand First, some of us vote for National, some vote for the Greens. God forbid some vote for the Tamakis and their hoonalongs.
Not many. Not many of the
but
anybody
they
vote for
do.
them.
Or Sue Gray and their guys. But, I think for it to get to a point of a referendum, actually what Seymour did was he ruled out having a citizens-initiated referendum or him supporting a citizens-initiated referendum. I note that in the last couple of days, as I suspected, his narrative changed to say kind of like what you've said, Blake. There's enough people that might want it. We should have a referendum. And so this is that crafty, cunning way that politicians push their narrative to a successful outcome. Look, if I was to talk about the politics of it for a moment, my view is that, and it's a very long-held view, that what Seymour's trying to do is attract a greater percentage of votes over from the National Party. National is losing their ground because, like Labour, they've also lost what it is that they stand for, their identity. Labour's bleeding votes on the left to the Greens and to Party Māori. National's bleeding votes on the right to New Zealand First and to the ACT Party. National need a lot of votes to maintain their role at the centre of any coalition government as the main party. Whereas, look, New Zealand First and the ACT Party, they just need to get across, get over 5%. What's also quite remarkable in that world of politics, Blake and Paul, is that when you really have a look at the numbers and what happened at the last election, East Tamaki fell to the ACT Party without a dodgy deal in the seat of Epsom with Paul Goldsmith, whereas Paul would just say, oh, no, we're really going to stand the national candidate, that's me, and I'm going to do my best. Well, we know that didn't happen. Whereas what's also happening is that the party vote or the electorate vote on the right is also showing more in ACT's ledger than ever before. So, yeah, I'm going to respectfully disagree. I think this is not about the benefits or the wherefore of a referendum and our understanding of Te Tiriti o Waitangi. This is very much a political narrative. And one final thing I'd say as well, if we were to have an honest discussion about the future constitutional arrangements in New Zealand, given that we actually do not have a constitution, and actually Te Tiriti o Waitangi is not a constitution. It was an agreement between two parties, Māori and the Crown, not everybody else and the Crown, Māori and the Crown. And also people forget that at the time the treaty was signed, you've got to go back a couple of earlier years to He Whakaputanga, which was the Declaration of Independence, and understand that actually the reason why all the chiefs of the North sent a letter to King William, who was a predecessor to Queen Victoria, around He Whakaputanga was to seek protection from the Crown, not to hand over the lands, but because those early settlers were prostitutes and vagabonds and whalers and drunkards and bootleggers. They were concerned that the European population in New Zealand at the time was out of control. And that's exactly the same sort of reason, although Busby probably had something a little bit more in tow, which was he saw encroachment in the north of other foreign European, mostly European governments, Russia. The French had already arrived in New Zealand. And so he thought, well, actually, if I'm going to get access to great trading and all the rest of it, then maybe we should do this deal. But keep in mind, it had nothing to do with everybody else, which is another line that Seymour pushes. However, coming back to my point, if everybody wants to have a discussion about the future constitutional arrangements of New Zealand, then let's do that. Let's do what the Australians did. I think it was under the Howard government or Hawke, whoever it was, having a constitutional forum. Let's have a talk about the fact that over many years, New Zealand's laws have essentially been made up by a combination of legislation and decisions from the judiciary. But it's that in itself is a fair and reasoned discussion. But actually, Seymour doesn't want to have that discussion because he's already told us all last Tuesday night on the Bradbury show. And I hesitate to call it a debate too, by the way. A debate requires rebuttal. And I'm not too sure there was a lot of rebuttal going on. I think there was a lot of talking on a panel, kind of like newstainment does. I wouldn't have called that a debate necessarily. But coming back to it, he doesn't want a referendum on or a discussion on constitutional reform because he told us all that the academics, the politicians, the judiciary, and everybody else were at fault, and they don't know what they're talking about. Only David has the answer. Well, I'm not going to swear.
You're more than welcome to. We're on the internet. You can swear as much as you like.
I have not heard so much bullshit from a single politician in my entire life. And keep in mind, I come from the Australian school as well of politics, where around this time, right about now, we call this the killing season, where there was a period in Australian politics, as an example, where I think they had 6 prime ministers within the space of only a few years. John Howard he lost his seat. Then Tony Abbott came in. Tony Abbott was kicked out by Kevin Rudd, but on the way out, he was ultimately nicked by Malcolm Turnbull. Kevin was nicked by Julia. To me.
Yeah.
We're dealing with politicians. Rant. That's my third rant over.
Yeah, and just to clarify, I don't agree with the other parts of the bill, only that part that I stated.
See, whereas I still think it's a stupid idea right from the start, and it feels very much like David going out and whipping up foment to get everybody all angry and pay attention to him. I did some research a couple of weeks ago, a big media research piece. He makes up 25% of all mainstream media mentions in this country. The Prime Minister's first, about 53%, and it's more than Winston Peters and Chris Hipkins combined. He is dominating media chat at the moment, and most of it is driven by talk of this bill. It is very manipulative, and it makes people look at him and not at other things that might be happening around him to, I don't know, people in court, for example.
Oh, and he'll be loving it. He loves it. I mean, we're talking about, first of all, we're not talking about a regular Joe Blow. We are literally talking about a career politician. This has been his aspiration for many, many years. And he's so good at his craft. If he's in Canada, he talks like a Canadian. I'm sure if he was in Swahili land, he'll probably speak Swahili. He's got his craft down pat, his one-liners, even his demeanor. I wouldn't say it's very demure. Isn't that TikTok trend? But he's very. He knows what he's doing.
Is it dangerous platforming him?
No, because that's what living in a democracy is about. I mean, look, I don't agree with David, but I would defend his right to be able to have a say. I'd also defend my right to call him out on his behaviour. I think the difference is, though, my belief in the right to have a voice, no matter who you are or what background you come from, versus this narrative that it's kind of like he supports open debate and all the rest of it. But when you really get down to it, Paul, does he really? No, he doesn't. I mean, because he like Iran has their proxies in the Middle East, David Seymour has his proxies, the Taxpayers Union, for example, and all these other nefarious characters.
You were having your platform as part of the coverage of the debate among many other platforms. So what was it like to have your platform a part of that coverage?
Well, first of all, on purpose, we kept the comments on social media on. That's the first thing. I decided just to see what the reaction was from across the mutu. The second thing was, we ran an afternoon show prior to the debate at 8 o'clock. So ours ran from 3 to 5. And there was something like 400 plus comments coming through on should the debate happen or not. The vast majority said absolutely not. So for us, it was an insight into what did Māori really think. Because the other risk is you've got parties like Te Pāti Māori, for example, who, when you have a look at what they do, my criticism of Te Pāti Māori is they yell at you. And not only do they yell at you, it gives a semblance that every Māori thinks like they do and like to be yelled at. Well, actually, that's not the case. We like reason, debate, discussion, and in the main, Māori are actually also very conservative by their very nature as well. I mean, all you have to do is have a look at what happened in 1993. See, let me just give you another quick history lesson, boys, if you don't mind, because I'm loving this. In the early 1960s, the then national government decided that if they were able to be successful and win a by-election in Northern Māori, then quite possibly the rest of the seats might fall to the rest of the Māori seats might fall to them. And those Māori seats back then were Northern Māori, Southern Māori, Eastern Māori, and Western Māori. Anyway, so along came the national government. They offered a few things called the 1962 Māori Community Development Act amongst them and all the rest of it. And they just about pulled it off. They just about pulled off the by-election of the early 1960s. Anyway, so then along comes this man, initially in the seat of Hanua here in Auckland, which was Winston Peters. And people forget that Winston was a national man. Winston fell out with the then Bolger government, or the government of the time, over something called Ka Awatea, which was a Māori policy. Anyway, so in 1993, we saw the two things happen: the launch of New Zealand First, and also the standing up of a candidate called Tau Henare. And Tau, of course, his grandfather is the Grand Man of the North, the Māori warrior who served in the Second World War, Sir James Henare. Anyway, so all of a sudden in 1993, Winston Peters did what National couldn't do in the by-election of the 1960s, and he won the seat of Northern Māori through Tau Henare. Then in 1996 came in quick succession the fall of all the Māori seats to those. I think they used to wear dirty dogs or whatever it was. Tuariki John Delamere, my own uncle, Tu Wiley, he used to play rugby with my dad, and so on and so forth. Now the Māori seats were lost back to Labour again, and now they've turned over to Te Pāti Māori, etc., etc., etc. So Māori are a very non-homogenous voting group. I mean, Christ, we vote for New Zealand First one day, Labour the next, Te Pāti Māori the next, throw a couple of series at the Greens, and off we go. So for me, the hosting of it on our platforms was very much about seeing the mood of the Māori nation, but also I believe, and again, this is now my fourth rant, I do believe that in many ways we have reached what we call the peak Māori audience. And so it's kind of like the big debate that's going on in mainstream broadcasting at the moment, the relevancy of television in New Zealand and RNZ, and Tamir. Sorry, Tamir is the Māori way of me expressing, etc., etc., etc. Very much like the King and I, one of my favourite all-time movies. The original with Yul Brynner, not the latest incarnation. Anyway, so basically, the peak Māori audience means that, okay, if we've reached the peak Māori audience here, who else is interested in the kaupapa around Māori issues? And so then it comes down to who are our allies, who are our supporters. And when you then break it down in the terms of the demographic, a large number of New Zealanders have mokopuna or have whānau in their own families now who have a percentage of Māori whakapapa somewhere in there. It's like being part Irish. How do I explain this? Part of me is Irish, part of me is Māori, which I am both. Part of me wants to go to the pub, the other half doesn't want to go home, and neither of me wants to pay for it. That's probably a really bad way of summing up my whakapapa or my genealogy, actually. Apologies to all the Irish folk out there.
Another thing that really bothered me about the debate itself is Damen Grant and David Seymour kind of took it over a little bit, and that was quite painful, especially when Mr. Grant openly admitted that he donates to the X Party.
I find myself quite enlivened by this discussion. I looked at it and I was watching it, and I've watched it, I don't know, about a dozen times since. And I actually thought Damen Grant was completely out of his depth. I think Damen was hoping that there would be more of a focus on the idea that Te Tiriti o Waitangi is some sort of contract or agreement in a contractual manner between Māori and the Crown. And I think that's where he thought he would live in terms of his kōrero that night. I think he largely sat to the side and really, really was uncomfortable with pronouncing Māori words like ka Wanatanga. which is not. I mean, to be honest, I thought he was going to start talking about. I think the Japanese word is katana, the sword. I thought he was going to start going off on all sorts of different tangents, but he didn't. I think he was uncomfortable. I think he didn't understand the topic as much. I think he just breezed in and thought he'd throw out some one-liners, and that's why I say that it wasn't a debate necessarily.
One of the questions that's actually come through on the chat, I'll bring it up, wants to know whether or not you actually think that conversation was productive, because you're never going to change David's mind, but do you think it's impacted other people, given them a different perspective on things?
Do I think it was productive? No, I don't. I don't think it was productive for a couple of reasons. Number one, I don't think it was productive in terms of being led by a man like David Seymour, who's by his very nature is going to cause division given his track record. That's the first thing. The second thing, did it teach us anything new? Did it teach the audience anything new? Did it teach New Zealanders anything new? No, it didn't. And that's because, basically it was a discussion about what we already know or what we already knew. There were also inaccuracies in terms of some of the things that were being talked about. For example, one of the parts of the discussion dove into a court case. I think it was of the early 1990s. Involving Māori land. Well, actually, it was, I believe they were talking about the State-owned Enterprises Act and the fact that back in the day, the New Zealand Māori Council, of which I used to be the executive director, took a case to all the way to the Privy Council in relation to the State-owned enterprises and won. And so David Seymour was attempting to reference that. I don't think there was enough knowledge in the room to say, well, actually, no, mate, you're wrong. It's like, I must admit, it was more newstainment. It was kind of like I was waiting for they're eating the dogs, they're eating the cats. I mean, we must have been eating the possums, the kiwis, and the wickers. So I think there were factual inaccuracies, number two. And number three, the third point I'd make is that did it cause any other discussion across the media in particular in the aftermath of the debate? In the 24-hour news cycle since then, very little. And so I think if you want to get to talk about the Te Tiriti o Waitangi, etc., I think that what's really happened is that New Zealanders are actually tired of it. They've turned off. They're tuning out. They're sick of it. They just want people and politicians in particular to focus on the things that they feel matter to them today. There might be a small handful of people that somehow think that this is the kaupapa or the discussion of the day. The vast majority of New Zealanders just want some pretty simple things. They want to see their mortgage interest rates go down. They want to be able to afford eggs and cheese and butter once more, the things that we ourselves grow in abundance. And they just want people to clean their shit up.
Yeah. What I found quite startling about the Prime Minister's media round that morning was a lot of the hosts asked him, "Are you going to watch the debate? Are you going to watch the debate?" And he said, "No, I'm too busy with other things. I don't have time to watch this debate." And I found that quite a really terrible thing to say about you're not going to watch your coalition partner, because if you do want to prove that your coalition is strong, even though we know it's not, you would at least say, "Oh, I'm going to watch it to support my coalition partner."
Yeah, a couple of things. I mean, I think we're yet to see if we're talking about politics more generally. I don't see a snap election on the horizon, but I certainly don't expect this coalition government to last the distance. And the reason I say that is because, David Seymour in the week or so leading up to the debate was attempting to tell Winston Peters what he can and can't say at the UN in a speech on Israel, I think it was. Although the conflict currently emerging in the Middle East, so you've got that. You've got the young recalcitrant teenager trying to tell old granddad what to do. Well, old granddad's a seasoned performer. He ain't going to put up with that sort of stuff. And I think you've got the middle manager from Central Casting and Christopher Luxon, whose claim to fame was having run Air New Zealand. Well, I remember when he ran Air New Zealand because I'm the one that took him on when he tried to trademark the words Kia ora on the in-flight magazine and took him all the way up to CNN and threw him at the behest of the media and said, well, okay, you want to go and trademark that word Kia ora? Not a problem. We'll all vote with a hip pocket and you won't have a very successful tenure as a chief executive, of which all of a sudden they dropped the trademark. So, you've got old mate from middle management, you've got granddad who's spoiling for a fight, and also survival. I mean, I think they've got their New Zealand First conference in Hamilton today. And then you've got the recalcitrant teenager in David Seymour who wants to convince us all that he's got our backs and saving the world. And by the way, nothing costs anything because we're saving so much money. and yet well, this whole process in the first reading is probably estimated to cost about $4 million or whatever it is. His new Ministry for Regulation, which is one of the brand new government departments that's been stood up by him, also with Gráinne Moss, the former chief executive of Maoritanga Tamariki, leading it. I mean, I think every New Zealander thought she'd already left the stage or something, but no. And the average salary of these bozos in his new ministry, $100,000 plus or whatever it is. So, I'm not surprised Luxon didn't want to watch the debate. He was probably at home like old Scrooge McDuck diving into his pool of gold coins. Hey, just before I lose my thought process, I'm not suggesting that the whole debate or the semblance of a debate was a waste of time. And I'm not saying that New Zealanders themselves are just turning off. New Zealanders themselves already know what the issues are. And New Zealanders are also embarrassed quietly. The vast majority of New Zealanders are probably very embarrassed at the presence of now an increasing semblance of overt racism and bias and all this other and discrimination in our society. We like to think that New Zealand is such an open, free and advanced nation. We were the first to give women the vote. We were one of the first to go with marriage equality and all the rest of it. We told the French to hijack themselves off to who was it? Alain Martha and Dominique Prieur, when even our Keystone Cops were able to get them after blowing up the Rainbow Warrior. We stood against the Springbok too. We like to think of ourselves as a nation that stands up for the little guy. And yet we're also deep-seatedly an embarrassed nation because we know what our dirty laundry looks like when we clean under the bed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Doesn't make us bad. It just no. I think often we just need a bit of a reality check. This is where we are. This is our progression along the continuum of evolution as a nation. And coming back to your earlier point, Blake, this is why I do think that had there been a credible discussion raised around the future constitutional arrangements of our nation, then we could have the discussion about, well, okay, so where on the continuum of evolution are we in terms of nationhood? And if we're at this place, how far do we have to go in terms of the most appropriate model for us as a nation?
It does. Yeah. The thing that always surprised me about this debate as well is there's a ton of disinformation out there, a ton of bullshit that gets thrown around. And one of the claims is different rights for people based on birth. From somebody who's a really big fan of the royal family and the whole idea of one specific family having different rights based on birth, being in charge of everybody. It just feels like a really weird contradiction to me that, this version is bad, but this version is good. I just can't work out what the difference is between the two.
In all honesty, I don't think there's a great version of this stuff anywhere around the world. Every democracy or republic with the notion of a president as its head has a problem. I mean, just have a look at Brazil, and Brazil's been out there, their case study for hundreds of years now. Look at the recent implosion of Venezuela. I could name any number of countries, and on the odd occasion, without the correct balances and checks, you end up with a Russia, or God forbid, a conflict between brothers in North and South Korea. So, we're looking for a very imperfect model, which is why I think it's always best that we start off and have an honest conversation about where we are on the continuum of evolution as a nation. And we should start to talk about nationhood. We shouldn't be we're talking about statecraft or warcraft or peacecraft or any of these things. They're nothing more than functions of nationhood. There's somebody, so if I can just say, somebody put a comment in there about we used to be great. I think that I watched this on I think it's called The Newsroom, which is a program out of the United States with one of the Daniels brothers in it. And there's a speech that he gives while he's on a panel. And I think it's become the sorority girl episode from memory. And he does. I mean, and in fairness, there's a lot of that would resonate with any country around the world. Yeah, we used to be a great country. We used to be a great nation. I mean, hell, look at Sir Edmund Hillary climbing Mount Everest, even though that's up for discussion now after another foot was found. Or have a look at Ernest Rutherford splitting the atom, or Sir Alexander Tate and Tate Electronics down in Christchurch, right through to what happened with the New Zealand standing against apartheid in the Springbok tour. And even though some of our greatest exports have been racist, like Sir Joe Bjerke, or not racist, I can't call him that, he's dead, Sir Joe Bjerke Peterson, who we exported to Queensland, we've been very good at exporting our unique model to other places of the world. But we used to be a great country. We haven't stopped being a great country. We've just had a few hiccups along the way, and unless we sort our relationships out with each other, we're just going to be honest, people are just going to be looking at us like dicks.
So the last thing I was going to ask you about with the debate was I was quite disappointed that TVNZ promoted it heavily throughout the day on their various breakfasts and all that kind of thing. But when it came to the debate, I didn't really see much coverage of it, unless I missed it, and someone can correct me in the chat. But if that's the case, that's not very good for our government broadcaster.
I think we could have a whole discussion about broadcasting. I honestly think that our national broadcaster is struggling with identity right now. Look, here's the truth of it, Blake. The way that New Zealanders and the world consume their news and current affairs has fundamentally changed, and it's going to continue to evolve. Audiences for the 6 o'clock news are getting less and less. I think there was some data out recently where RNZ's on-air figures are down, their online figures are up. And the same is true with me as a broadcaster. We provide the National Māori News Service. Our on-air radio numbers are down in the last survey period, and yet our online numbers are through the roof. I think the last time I looked at it, which was just yesterday afternoon, in fact, at the total number of views on our watianews.com site was about 1 million, compared to less than 10,000 on air for the survey period for radio. So there's been an ongoing shift in audience, an ongoing shift in content consumption, and therefore I would say a problem with relevancy and identity. And I also think the days where you required a studio and massive amounts of money to inject an infrastructure and camera equipment. Look at us now. We're on StreamYard. Is it StreamYard or StreamFarm? StreamYard. We're on StreamYard. And we can do this with cameras on our phones, whereas once you couldn't do that. Hell, I'm so old. Paul, I don't know how old you are, Paul. I'm so old now that I remember green screens on my computer and CRT monitors and printers that went.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't know what a laser printer was, and now look at me. I got this microphone set up. I've got a touchy screen, and I sit here spending my hours scrolling through TikTok feeds and something called a reel. So yeah, I'm not surprised, Blake. I think they're looking for relevancy, and I think that's no different to every country around the world. ABC's in trouble. I think the only one that is surprisingly not necessarily in trouble in a very tight media market and news and content market is the BBC. I mean,
no, they're in trouble.
Oh, are they?
They are. Their take over the last 12 months, because they have the broadcasting fee paid directly to them, and that's how they get their income. Broadcasting fee, and it's like the online streaming service that you pay for. The take on that's been going down steadily for the last 5 or so years, and the last financial year was the worst they've ever had.
Well, I just want to thank you, Paul, for making me feel just a little bit older now, because as soon as you said a fee, I remember the TV license fee.
So my dad's an electrician, and I remember they used to come knocking on the door to make sure that you've paid your broadcasting fee, and he didn't one year. And like, well, you have to pay your fee, and you've got a television, you've got to pay your fee. So he brought them in, and he cut the power cord on the television. And like, as soon as they're gone, he just rewired the whole thing back up together. It's like, yeah, what? Why would I pay for a fee like that? Yeah.
See, people forget, Blake. That's how broadcasting and the old Crown State Broadcast used to be funded in this country. The old TV license fee.
Yeah, I like to research old stuff. I know lots about that.
Sad. It's like we said.
So yeah, my very first day at uni, the head of the film and TV department at Waikato said to the whole sort of incoming group, "We're training you now for things that don't exist. We're training you for broadcast that isn't being broadcast yet. We're training you on technology that doesn't exist yet, and we're training you to tell stories in ways that people can't tell stories yet." That was early 2000s. It's just completely different now. Yeah, it's the way that we look at things and how we communicate is completely different.
And you know what? It's going to be. It's taken us 20 years to get here. It's probably going to be completely different in the next 6 months.
Yeah,
because technology is evolving so quickly. I mean, I must admit, I said to somebody the other day, look, this TMU business is. I'm addicted to TMU. I can't help it. In fact, when I was in the studio the other day with Shane and Bomber Branbury, they said to me, "Oh wow, Matt, you've got those glasses of yours look really good. Yeah, $3.95 from TMU."
Perfect.
But I guess my point is that it's not just about the products now that are being sold on platforms like TMU. They don't care. It's about the data. It's about understanding more about us and our society and how we live, work, and play. And that's one past one of these, the last part of my fifth rant of the night, which is I don't think that mainstream broadcasts have quite figured out yet what the demographic shift in population desires are of New Zealand. I think they're struggling with it. I don't think they're not. I think we've become way too Americanized in terms of the way that we both produce and deliver content. And I also think that probably what's happened is that that's confused the decision-making process of even our state broadcaster. Mind you, do I give two shits if Shortland Street was cancelled? No.
But that's a really interesting thing in terms of our media production, that it's been around for ages and it's very high intensity, relatively high intensity, really good training ground for people to go off and do other media afterwards. But yeah, it's in terms of what it actually offers in terms of cultural value. I don't know anybody who's watched Shortland Street consistently for years.
Oh, I think probably only the cast of Shortland Street, their better halves, their children, and their families. I hate to say I'm being mean to a New Zealand institution now, but I mean, if you have a look at the amount of money that we pile into Shortland Street, and that became the topic of discussion as Newshub was also fighting for survival. I think what we also do is we confuse entertainment with news. I call it newstainment. If you have a look at the breakfast show in the morning and all this other sort of stuff, it's very much about the, let's go to work and make you happy. Well, actually, how about we send you to work and make you informed? Let's inform you. And so, in many ways, and I must admit, it used to make me cringe when I used to watch Mandy McLean on TV1 Breakfast interview the Prime Minister or political leaders and think to myself, well, hang on, you've gone from the weather to the breakfast hosting or co-hosting duties, whatever, and now you're interviewing politicians and potentially world leaders? The hell you are, son. So, I honestly think that until we get that model right, and Blake, I don't know what you think about TVNZ, but certainly I think the business model has become too corporate. But don't forget, It's a state-owned enterprise. It's meant to be delivering dividends to the Crown. And quite frankly, I'd rather they not deliver dividends to the Crown. I would rather they invest that money back into modern day production.
If you want my honest opinion on TDZ, I'm actually going to disagree with you on Maddie McLean. I think for that period, him and Joel Campbell were two of the best journalists that TVNZ had.
So, and that's, I guess that you've just summed it up for me right there, Blake, because one of them is a journalist and one of them is not a journalist. One of them is trained to be a journalist and one of them was not. One of them also produces docu-series and investigative journalism, and one doesn't. And so that's why I bring up the notion of newstainment versus news. Creation of news and the reporting of news is a craft. And the thing that disturbs me the most about people who enter into the craft is that it becomes more about them than the craft itself. And it comes down to the whole notion of journalists are required to report the news. They're not meant to become the news. And I do think that's what's gone on over at TVNZ.
So you don't think Maddie McLean is underrated? Because I certainly would think
I think he's a great performer. I think he's a fantastic performer. I'm not denying that he's really good at keeping the audience engaged. That he's got a great life story that resonates with a lot of people. But I do once again say that there is a big difference between news and the craft of journalism and not. So, for example, I'm a publisher. I'm not an editor. So I don't edit the news. I don't tell my team specifically what they should be reporting on. I don't tell them they should kill stories. There's only been one occasion since arriving at the Māori broadcaster Wātia where I've stepped in, which is a requirement of a publisher in relation to the Broadcasting Standards Authority and a statement made on air by one of our guests. But see, I understand my role. I understand the line, and my line is not to interfere into the machinations of the newsroom.
You see, because that's where I think it's a shame. Because, like, to me, you should be in front of the camera more. Because, to me, apart from probably Bomber and a few others, you're probably one of the best political commentators in this country for me. So
yeah, you're going to make me go to bed with a big head and an ego.
No, but seriously, you should be in front of the camera more, because that interview that you did with Don Brash was excellent. Probably one of the best political interviews I've seen in quite a few years this year across anything. And I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you. Look, I'm not trying to demean Matt McLean. I think he's a fantastic guy. I really do, and I love his story. I love everything he's done. I'm just talking about the if we're going to see news return to be a trusted element in New Zealand society, I'd love young people to still want to go into business wanting to be a journalist as opposed to an influencer.
Yeah, and I'm sorry.
And don't get me started about TikTok.
No comment.
And I'm sorry to the
I
chat
don't comment about TikTok.
that my voice tightens up when I get passionate, but
no,
that's just how I feel. Yeah.
So we'll wrap this up soon, but do you want to do some quick fact checking for me, Matt?
Sure.
So these are comments that were made by David Seymour during the debate. Bringing it back around to that one. So you can let me know whether or not they are accurate. David claimed that Maori have different voting rights to Pākehā. True or false?
False.
Maori ceded sovereignty.
False.
Helmut agreed with him.
On occasion.
Okay. Sir Apirananath's translation of the treaty is the only version of the treaty that should be read by Pākehā.
Incorrect. However, it's a very interesting work.
Mm-hmm. It really is. Is he actually just focusing on the future instead of trying to stir up the past?
No.
Were New Zealanders all united against apartheid?
No. And sorry,
David,
and just on that point, I'm not completely sure David Seymour was born when the Springboks tour was on.
I think he was one. He's about my age, so I think he was sort of 1 or 2 about the time that it happened. So yeah, he would have been very, very young. And then finally, David said that it was really about race, not about anything else.
Incorrect. Can I just say something about Sir Apirananath? I think the way that Seymour and also Winston Peters at New Zealand First take the spirit of what Sir Apirananath has said is just completely abhorrent to me. Apirananath was not only a great man and a great Māori, and he was a great New Zealander. He will be one of the very few New Zealanders that strode between different lefts and rights and politics and all the rest of it. There's a speech he made about the price of citizenship, and I would ask everybody to go and read it. There's something in each one of the speeches that he made that will resonate with us, depending no matter what our political inclinations might be. And this is a man who also believed that Māori, at a time when Tapuia, Princess Tapuia of the Kingitanga, didn't believe that we should be, but go to war and fight, because that was the price of citizenship. His own sons went. There is a very long letter that's emerged from his great-great-granddaughter recently, and I think Stacey Morrison did something with her on a TV program recently on the national broadcast, on the state broadcaster, TVNZ, the Taonga series, I think it is, where Te Apirananath writes to his daughter-in-law with great sadness and grief at the fact that her husband, his son, would be longer at war than had first been anticipated. So I really despise and find abhorrent the way that Seymour, in today's little narrative to suit himself, takes a lot of what that great man said out of complete context to suit his own nefarious means.
Mm-hmm. He's not the only one.
No.
NZCPR, the Centre for Political Research, Dr. Muriel Newman and her lot.
Isn't that exact MP, Muriel something or other?
Yeah. Yep, Muriel Newman. Raising funds from people so that they can pay for 1.5 million copies of the translation to be in newspapers covers it.
Wow,
because that's the only translation that people should read.
That's what scam artists do, though, Paul. They try and convince the good folk of New Zealand to part with their cash, not because they believe in the kaupapa, but because they want the cash.
Yeah. Yep, exactly.
Fucking thieving dogs. Thieving dogs, sorry.
Yep, absolutely. Before we sign off, I should probably go through some paid comments. Stick around, Maddie. I want to have a chat to you afterwards about something. But yeah,
great.
We'll do the comments. We'll sign off. Anything else that you want to sign off with, Matt? Blake, before I go through the comments.
Just that we will be back to hopefully our regular schedule next in a few days.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. So much for a weekend off. We have a late fee from Mr. Arvids. Thank you very much for that. David sent a late fee as well. Kiwi Skirts gifted 5 memberships, which is very cool. And we've got a koha here from MB1968NZ. Thank you very much, guys, for everything. I think that's us all wrapped up for the night. We'll let everybody go off and enjoy the rest of their weekend.
I was late, guys.
I'm gonna have to get Pat to do I'm gonna have to tell Pat why he created the late fee thing. And now that's not gonna go anywhere.
Yeah. It's all right. We'll blame Pat. It's always all good to blame Pat for everything. We'll be fine, I'm sure. All right, guys. Have a fantastic night. Ka kite anō. Until next time, enjoy.
Bye.